Hey everybody, long time no see. So as you can tell, there's been a little bit of a change of scenery. I had to leave Taiwan, as I talked about in my last video. And for those of you who have been to Turkey, you might recognize this place just out the window as Pamukkale, aka the Cotton Castle, aka one of the most magical places in the world. So Turkey, unlike Japan, has a very sensible border policy during the COVID era. And basically, when you arrive at the airport here, you fill out a card to say if you've had any symptoms in the past 14 days. They make you go through a temperature screener. And if you have a temperature or if you ticked any boxes on the card, you get a COVID test. If not, you enter as normal. People wear masks all the time here. I actually have mine here in case anyone else comes into this restaurant. And, you know, there's hand sanitizer everywhere, and I would say people are pretty vigilant, but it's not this whole apocalypse now thing that Japan and so many countries, particularly in Asia, have. So it's wonderful, just to feel the joy of travel again. If any of you are looking to take a trip right now and you don't want to have to deal with quarantines or the uncertainty of travel bans, Turkish Airlines has restarted a great deal of their pre-COVID network. So you should consider coming here. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. But at any rate, that's not the topic of this video. This video is about an update to the Japan travel ban as of October 2020. There hasn't been a huge amount of change since my last video. So as you'll know if you watched that video, as of October 1st, Japan greatly expanded the number of residents who would be allowed back in. So basically all new entries of people that have any long stay visa over 3 months from every country are allowed in if they follow a number of very stringent entry requirements, including departure COVID testing within 72 hours, COVID testing after arrival, 14 days quarantine. There's this pledge that the organization accepting them has to sign, and there's a few other conditions. But basically, if you have authorization to be in Japan for longer than 3 months and you do not have coronavirus, you can enter now. So contact your embassy or consulate. And now there are a couple other developments or non-developments that I want to highlight in this video. So the first is that last week, so the first week of October 2020, there was a rumor that tourists were going to be allowed back in Japan starting in April 2021. And now some people were excited about this, obviously, because it's sort of the first light at the end of that very dark tunnel. But I don't know, I viewed that news with cynicism. First of all, because it wasn't just we're going to fling open the door to all tourists, which really should be possible by that point, given the fact that there's going to be widely available vaccines in many countries by then. And that Japan's testing capacity should almost be equivalent to the number of people who were entering prior to the pandemic. But yeah, they were saying they might restrict the countries that tourists can come from. They're going to prevent them from using public transport for 14 days, which I don't know how that's going to work, considering most people come for 14 days or fewer. They were saying they were considering restricting the areas within the country that people can go, which, hello, North Korea? I don't know. It sounded like a hot mess, and worst of all, it was based on rumors from people in the Japanese government. There was nothing officially said, so we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, on one hand, I do think the Japanese government uses the media to telegraph future policy proposals, but I don't know. I hope they come up with a better plan than that, because the idea of keeping the border closed to tourists for an entire year and then doing some half-assed, half-baked North Korea-style opening at that point, 3 months before the Olympics, it seems like bullshit. And I say that as someone who more or less predicted this. I mean, if you watched my last video, I did mention how I thought late first quarter, early second quarter 2021 was a good time when they might be able to begin allowing tourists again for various reasons. But I didn't think that it was going to be this. Again, Japan is obsessed with phases in this. They stratify everything into different criteria and tiers, and I guess it just gives them the illusion of control. Because honestly, I mean, I don't know. That I could go down a whole rabbit hole about this, but anyway, it's nonsense, and I hope that they come up with a better plan. The second thing, and this I think is more important because a lot of people have falsely gotten their hopes up, and this is also something I talked about. So in mid-September, Motegi announced at the first press conference after Suga became PM that Japan was going to consider lowering the travel alert level for 16 countries in Asia Pacific to level 2 from level 3, which would theoretically remove the entry ban that the Ministry of Justice has placed on travelers from those countries. Now, at the time, I saw that as pretty big news because, again, this would be a comprehensive lifting of the entry ban. But unfortunately, now that we see the restrictions Japan is placing on returning residents, new residents, and even business travelers, I just don't see them reopening the border to tourists from these 16 countries in November, because that's what the rumor is, that they're going to lower the level in November. Even if they're willing to quarantine for 14 days, I think that they seem to not want to let go at all. And so, I got a comment from one of the readers of one of my other sites, who basically said, oh, well, in the newspaper here today, he's from Singapore, so I guess it was the Straits Times, he said, Japan is opening a travel green lane and Singapore is on the list. And of course, any of you who've been following this hashtag Japan travel ban saga knows that issues with Japanese immigration are never so simple. But I had to unfortunately burst his bubble a little bit and say, no, there is no green lane happening. While Singapore might be officially taken off the ban list, travelers are not going to be taking a holiday to Japan in 2020. I'm pretty confident of that right now. Obviously, I'll eat my words happily if that ends up not being true. I will own my mistake. But again, with the level of control Japan is exerting, even over residents and business people, I just don't see them opening up to tourists. I think what it'll be, and I heard some reports of this happening in April and May when not all countries were banned, is that officially people on any visa from these countries will be able to visit, but what it'll be is you won't be able to board the flight to Japan unless you have a visa issued by an embassy. So even if your passport is from a country such as US, Australia, New Zealand, or Taiwan, where the visa on arrival is theoretically still valid, you won't actually be able to board a flight to Japan unless you have one of these special visas that's issued by an embassy. So will the ban on travelers from these 16 countries, Vietnam, Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, yada, 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 will that be lifted on November 1st? That's very possible, but I would bet a lot of money against the idea that tourists are going to be welcome. So unfortunately, as much as it pains me to say this, I think the earliest tourists are going to be welcome in Japan is next April. Unless something changes, and God, I hope it does. As for me, I will be in Turkey, I guess, for around 2 or 3 more weeks at least. I might stay longer than that, depending, I have to be honest, I'm not in a rush to get back to the U.S. with in the lead up to the election, and probably not in the couple weeks after it until they actually know who won. And of course, as some of you know, because of my situation in Taiwan, I was supposed to enter Japan in October on my student visa, but I actually going to have to push that back to January because I'm going to have to convert my COE into a visa at the embassy or the consulate in Chicago. So I'll be entering either in late December or early January, depending on when I get my visa and depending on what the quarantine rules are at that time. My first day of class is scheduled for January 8th. So obviously, if I want to be there in time for that, I'm going to have to enter in late December, but I'm not exactly sure how all that's going to work. So I'll keep you all updated about that. The wonderful news is that a lot of people in my various Facebook groups who had been waiting to enter Japan all this time and who did have their visas in time for October have already entered Japan. I'm so happy for all of you who've been able to do that. I'm excited for all of you who are just getting your visas now and who are going to be entering in the coming days and weeks. And those of you who don't have visas, those of you who have visas to enter in January or April, or who are tourists and are just still kind of in limbo, I empathize with you. I get it. We're all in this together. We're just going to have to be patient. And, have faith in science and technology that we're probably going to have a medical cure to this before politicians get their heads out of the sand and start making decisions based off of facts in the current situation as opposed to wanting to get reelected again. And again, we also have to believe, it's like I said in my last video, although the Olympics, I think, initially was an impediment to people being allowed back into Japan and into Japan for the first time, I do think that it's very unlikely that Japan is going to roll back any of the rolling back they've done already, right? Because if they all of a sudden state that residents from all over the world can enter as of October 1st, and then, in November or December, they go back on that, I think politically that will kill the Olympics, and they want to host the Olympics at any cost. So I'm optimistic that things will continue progressing, although unfortunately probably not as fast as most of us are hoping. So I hope y'all are doing well. I won't take any more of your time. And if you are looking for a trip before you're able to come to Japan, I highly encourage you to come to Turkey. All right, bye.